Kirsten, well, amidst a major budget shortfall of $20 million for the next school year, Tulsa Public School Superintendent Dr. Deborah Gist is rolling out the district's plan to bridge that gap. And Dr. Gist joins us live this morning. Thanks so much for taking time out.
Thank you. Good morning, Travis.
I know you have been busy, got late night meetings, early morning interviews, so we really appreciate you being here. So let's just get right into it. We asked on our Facebook page for some viewer questions there. And we got a couple, and Sam wants to know why the 4 schools that were closed, Grimes, Wright, Mark Twain, and Jones specifically, why those were chosen for closure. Why aren't any secondary schools being closed?
Sure. Well, let me answer the second part of that first. So we focused on elementary schools for these recommendations. And the reason for that is that when Tulsa went through, a lot of people remember Project Schoolhouse in 2011. I think about 14 schools were closed. There was an emphasis on the middle schools that year. And so a lot of people don't realize that our high schools and middle schools and junior highs and high schools are together in the same building. About half of them have a middle school and a high school together. So it's a 6th through a 12th or a 7th through a 12th. So they look at the high school numbers and they feel like the schools are small. They don't realize there's another group of students in a different set of grade levels in that school as well. And so that's the reason that we ended up with recommendations around elementary. We look at everything from historical and projected enrollment, census data. We look at the building condition, the building size, how much of the building is being used. And we also need to look at the surrounding schools and whether or not the surrounding schools are, how their enrollment is looking and how much of their building is being used.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of the space was just kind of empty at those schools, and you saw a need to move those students somewhere else or kind of reallocate the services and resources there?
Right. So as few as 35% of the building being used in the recommendations that we're making.
Gotcha. Another question that we had from Jeff, he said, would you be open to an independent financial and physical audit?
Absolutely, and not only are we do one every single year. It's required, and it's available on our website.
Yeah, and so I mean, we're talking about $20 million here. You know, that's not pocket change here. That's a lot of money. How did the district get into this position? Was there like one bond proposition that failed that kind of started a trajectory, or was it just a slow thing over time that we kind of found ourselves here? What was kind of the reason?
It was definitely over time. So fortunately, we've had tremendous support from Tulsans on our bonds, and in fact, our last bond passed by more than 80% of Tulsa voters. No, this has been many, many decades in the making, actually, Travis, and I think it's important for folks to realize that there are really 2 factors that are going on. The biggest factor, and it's a factor that affects every school in the state, are the massive state cuts that our schools have experienced. But it's the second factor, along with a number of other things, that make Tulsa different from some of our friends in the suburbs. And when our enrollment, which is the second factor, is declining, which it has been for many decades. We were twice the size that we are now when I was in Tulsa Public Schools in the 70s. That then affects our bottom line because we're funded on a per pupil basis. So it's the combination of those 2 things. So we're working to stabilize our enrollment, and we're also going to continue to advocate and ask Tulsans to do the same to make sure that we're continuing to reinvest in education to at least get back to what we were spending in 2008.
Yeah, and so, I mean, you really wanted to focus on the service center. You wanted to stay away from teachers and from students because, you know, one thing that people always say, you know, there's too much money being spent at the service center. You know, why is there so much money being spent there? What about the students? What about the teachers? So you guys really wanted to focus on the, I'm not sure if administrative is the right word, but on the services at the service center and the folks that are there. So what are some of the things that are going to be cut that are going to make your way to that hopefully $20 million gap?
Right. Well, we always have had a commitment, and we heard from Tulsans they wanted the same. They want us to start as far away from students and teachers as possible. I think it's important for people to know that there's a perception that we are top heavy. We are not top heavy. There's a perception there are too many people in our district offices. We actually don't have enough people in our district offices. So when you think about the square miles that the folks who mow our grass mow, it's hundreds of square miles every single week. When you think about the number of devices it's 800 per technician in our information technology or IT office. These are unreasonable numbers in terms of our ability to serve our schools well. However, we completely agree with the sentiment that when we have to make reductions, when we have to make changes, we have to make them as far away from students and teachers as possible. So a couple of examples that we've used, some of them people won't feel the effects because we've made smart decisions like changing the way that we manage our workers' comp. That's about $1 million. People won't feel that. That's a great thing for us to do because it absolutely will not have a service effect on people. Another example, though, that will have a service change is transportation. We're holding on to transportation. We're still going to provide it, unlike districts in other places like Kansas who've stopped providing it except at a fee for the parents. We're going to hold on to that because we know that it's important to transport our kids to school. But we're going to change the way that we do it, and we may need to change some of the starting and ending times of school to spread out the number of buses we need at any one time, because if we have schools starting at different times, we can use those bus drivers differently.
Yeah, and one last quick question for you, the timeline moving forward. You guys are in meetings right now with parents trying to just educate the public on what your proposals are, but those are just proposals that you will then present to the board in January, and then from that point, when does the board make their decision?
So the board is scheduled to make the decisions around the staffing plan and the school closures and consolidation on January 21st. But there are lots of opportunities for people to share their thoughts and feedback at the meetings this week, always over email and letters and so forth. And then there are additional meetings at the proposed schools next week. And then at the meetings in January, these are public meetings and we encourage folks to come and participate.
Yeah. And so when are people going to know for sure if these positions are being cut, if these schools are closing? When is the final decision going to be made?
Well, in January 21st is when we'll present the staffing plan, which is how class sizes are determined, and the school closures and consolidations. The changes to the district office in terms of positions and so forth, that happens at the following meeting, so that'll be at the beginning of February.
All right, once again, Dr. Deborah Gist, Superintendent for Tulsa Public Schools, here with us this morning. Thank you so much for taking time out. We really appreciate it. Corey?